Hey guys, this is the third and final podcast where the audio is messed up and it's coming from the camera. So, got everything sorted. Um, I'm sorry it's been 3 weeks without the quality of podcast that I usually put out, but you got to take the good with the bad. And to my subscribers, listeners, followers, and also just as important, my guests, I am truly sorry again. Hopefully, in the near future, we can make this right, and I take full responsibility for this podcast sounding the way it does. Um, if you haven't seen the last two podcasts, or at least the intro to them, the audio for both podcasts and this one are actually, I just can't find them. So the audio you're hearing today is from the camera itself, so it's not as high quality as I would like it to, and I take full responsibility for that. And again, I am sorry, but hopefully you guys can enjoy the podcast anyway because it was a great episode. Thank you.
The finger handcuff is like PTSD or trauma. The more that we pull away from it and try to avoid it and get out of it, the tighter it gets. And those what ifs, I think, keep us stuck, right? Especially with trauma.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of meeting Mr. Rob, PTSD specialist. Is that the right thing?
Yeah. I'm a trauma specialist for counseling. I'm an LPC, so LPC stands for Licensed Professional Counselor. So I treat individuals really suffering from depression, anxiety, but my specialty is PTSD and trauma. I specifically specialize in something called EMDR, which is used to treat depression, anxiety, and PTSD and trauma.
And you've been doing this as long as Nikki, or have
I've been doing this longer than Chris. I think she was still in undergraduate school when I was starting my master's program, so I think I've been doing this a little bit longer, but yeah, give or take about the same length of time.
And was this like a certain, like a gradual thing that you just became fond of, or just like you always wanted to do this?
You know, so counseling and therapy, I think, is something I've always really wanted to do. In high school, I remember like having a plan of like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to college, then I'm going to go get my master's. This is what I want to do. But I think I got more interested in mental health. I had a friend of mine who was kind of like a family friend that I grew up with, and he had and was living with bipolar disorder and ended up committing suicide. So I think at that point, that was kind of like, okay, this is, I don't know, I guess I wanted to understand it maybe more. I'm not really sure, but that was, because it was still something I was interested in. I remember wanting to still do it before that, but I think that was kind of the catalyst of maybe I can help those that are kind of suffering from that.
I'm sorry to hear that. I had that.
Years ago, but
Yeah. So you think you become like more, you think your passion has grown more since you've been into it? Because
yeah.
I think something like that only grows with time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, man, it's just, EMDR can work so quickly, which is super cool. I've treated people in 6 sessions that have been carrying stuff for 40 years. Like,
Really?
yeah, so it there are times where it feels kind of like a magic wand. So much so that it doesn't even feel like it's me, it just feels like it's the thing. But yeah, I think the more I like learn about trauma and people's like behaviors, the more and more I really, really like it. And I think I'm good for it, because I think that when it comes to trauma, some people really struggle to kind of be there and be present with people telling like these horrible stories.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I can. So I can kind of sit with that, hold it, and then get, help them overcome it.
Yeah. I do want to ask if this is too much, feel free to stop.
Yeah.
What is like the most common age group that of people that you see?
Yeah, so my preferred population is in adults. So that's kind of who I see. But
Oh,
I've
okay.
seen kids and I've seen adolescents before. For a while, I was primarily treating like veterans and active duty, like combat related stuff, even non-combat related stuff. I've worked with veterans, active duty. I've worked with police officers. I've worked with survivors of like sexual assault or childhood sexual abuse. I had a client that was involved in human trafficking. So yeah, I've had a lot of people kind of walk through the door.
Yeah, and that's like, it's crazy to think that I'm sure you can back me up on this, that it's cases like that. Nothing specific, but those cases you named are way more common than people like realize. Because I'm sure there's a lot of people walking around with just trauma, and they just don't even open up about it. So similar to like eating disorder.
Yeah.
You just don't open up about it.
Yeah, so that's the thing, and this is a kind of a conversation I have with a lot of my clients is trauma, one of the key components of trauma is avoidance, right? And because of course there would be. Who would want to like have to talk about and experience and work through something that they're trying really, really hard to like forget or not let them impact them? But the thing about trauma and the thing about like avoidance is that it just makes things worse. So the analogy I use is like the Chinese finger trap. Are you familiar with that?
The handcuffs?
Yeah, like finger handcuffs, where, you know, if the finger handcuff is like PTSD or trauma, the more that we pull away from it and try to avoid it and get out of it, the tighter it gets. But if we lean into it, we can get out of it, right? And so when people hear, oh, the thing I have to do to get past this is actually work through it and face it, who wants to do that? I wouldn't want to do that.
It's a big...
It hurts.
Yeah, it's like a whole different change, because it's something, like you said, somebody of 40 years, that's 40 years of something that they've put off for that long.
Sure.
That just already like...
Yeah. Who can blame them, right?
Yeah.
And there's so much that goes into just like that avoidance piece too, because there could be cultural reasons, right? If someone who was active duty, who was a soldier, who experienced something is now experiencing this, you know, you have the stigma of, you know, needing to be strong and being a warrior, right? That warrior code, and they would perceive what they're experiencing as weak, so they're not going to talk about it, right? There's even, you know, barriers to kind of get through for that.
I did want to relate this somewhat to this whole topic. Are you big on movies?
Yeah, love movies.
What movies do you think have represented PTSD the best way? I'm thinking of one movie specifically, and if you name this one,
I mean, I may not have seen it. I don't know. So, I think about a clip from the movie American Sniper with Bradley Cooper. That's a pretty accurate representation of PTSD for active duty, right? They come home, they're not really there, they're just thinking about it. And there's a scene in particular where he's at his kid's birthday party or some kid's birthday party, and he's sitting there like alone in the living room, and it's just kind of playing like he's just thinking about combat, right? And he's just not present with his, you know, family. And so they bring him outside, and then he's sitting there, and he's just kind of like on edge, just looking at all of the kids and the sounds and the noises. And yeah, I think that's a pretty good, accurate representation of like post-traumatic stress disorder.
And that's like what you hear as feedback usually from active duty members. That's like exactly how the film is played off. That's exactly like what you think.
I don't think I've ever talked to anyone about that. Like one of my clients about, you know, is this a good like representation of it? Yeah. I just know that like symptomatically that it is. Was that the movie you were thinking of?
No.
What were you thinking?
But I was thinking in that realm, but one specifically was the movie Brothers.
I've never seen it.
Tobey Maguire, Jake Gyllenhaal.
Brothers. Oh, was that the more recent one that came out?
No, it was 2007.
Then I
or 2009.
Let's
Okay.
check.
Yeah, I don't.
Fact check on that, Jamie.
I don't
Yes.
think.
2009.
It says not.
2009. No, I've never
So
seen
you
it.
haven't seen that movie.
Yeah,
So,
I'll watch it.
Great film, one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah.
The main plot of the movie is. I can't even explain what it is because I was gonna say it gives it away. Like what?
Just trust me. Do
It's
you want
a-
to show him a clip? Maybe he can
I'll
like
watch it.
see
So
if that's.
it's a. I can't even describe it because like the main plot of the film is the spoiler of the film,
Got it.
which is weird.
Yeah, it is.
But I think there's a scene. I want you to hit me up after this when you
Okay.
watch. Whenever,
Yeah.
no rush. There's one scene in the end, and the way it's played off, in terms of like PTSD, I think like it hits me every time. With that is the only movie that every time I watch it, I'll cry or I'll feel something horrible. It's
Shout out to Tobey Maguire.
Shout out to Tobey Maguire.
He did so good.
But yeah, like I do know also that Saving Private Ryan,
Uh-huh.
when that film came out, there were like veterans, the first screening that had to be escorted out because that's how
Mhm.
accurate it was.
Sure. Yeah. I mean. Yeah. The loud sounds and all of that. That's can be one of those triggers.
And it's
that
like life altering essentially. But I mean,
can be. Yeah.
yeah, it can be.
I mean, it's physically altering.
Yeah.
When someone experiences a traumatic event, there are measurable differences between brain chemistry and like images on MRIs are different. And then when they go through treatment, things are different. So it's really interesting how the brain adapts to just stimuli or things that happen.
Yeah, I do think that it's crazy to think the way you said even like MRI scans before and after treatment. So those people that you said with 6 sessions, the
Mhm.
MRI scan will be like it will be completely different after that. After the
Yeah,
treatment?
primarily. Not sure in this case in particular.
Oh,
and
yes.
I do want to say like it can.
Yeah.
That was definitely one of the outliers where I was like, oh wow, this was real quick. And I remember that particular person and thinking, whew, man, this is gonna be a tough one, and it wasn't. And then I remember cases where it's like, yeah, this will be a breezy, easy walk in the park. They're gonna respond really well, and it was one of the most challenging, cases I've ever had to, do with someone. So you never truly, with EMDR and trauma, sometimes you never really know what you're gonna get.
So there's never really like with that being said, there's no really set way of like this person dealing with this, do this. It's always depends on the person, right? I would think so.
Yeah, so actually, there are numerous what we call treatment modalities, things that we can do in session for therapy that has been proven by research to work. And more specifically, there's 3 kind of golden standards of treatment. Prolonged exposure therapy, cognitive processing therapy, and EMDR are kind of like the 3 golden treatments.
One of those exactly.
Yeah, so they're just, they basically do most of the same way, but there are protocols that we do for PTSD to treat PTSD. So prolonged exposure therapy, I'm not trained in it, but essentially we are going to expose ourselves in one way, shape, or form to the traumatic event and things that you might be avoiding, right? I talked earlier about PTSD and trauma being avoidance. So avoidance, there are many different types of avoidance. So for someone who might have experienced combat, let's say, they might not want to be around crowds, so they're not going to go grocery shopping, right? So that we would call that behavioral avoidance. There's something called cognitive avoidance, where I'm going to do everything in my power to distract my brain so I'm not thinking about this event. There's lots of different avoidance. Substance use, right? Drinking, doing drugs, that's avoidance. So what prolonged exposure therapy does is it says, cool, you're avoiding going to a grocery store, we're going to go to a grocery store, right? So it is very much in your face, but what's cool about it is a lot of people will come in not really knowing that trauma or PTSD is happening. They'll come in and say, I have a lot of anxiety around grocery shopping, right? So a lot of what, my job is also educating. So that's kind of like prolonged exposure therapy. Cognitive processing therapy talks more about your thoughts and beliefs about yourself and what happened. So PTSD, there is a huge component of guilt and shame and the shoulds, right? So if, I got into a car accident, let's say, I might tell myself, man, I should have left sooner. I shouldn't have done X. Or if I would have done X, then it wouldn't have happened. So CPT, or cognitive processing therapy, targets that. And we kind of talk about it, right? Like, cool, you thought that if you would have left earlier, it wouldn't have happened. Maybe. That could be true. Maybe it is your fault, right? Let's talk about it and see if it truly is. EMDR kind of does both a little bit. So what EMDR does, and it's very hard to explain without kind of showing, but essentially what we do is I have you think about like the image, the worst part of the event. So if it's this car accident, I might think, okay, it's right before I hit this other car. And then I'm going to be carrying around some sort of belief. It's my fault, or I'm powerless. And I say, okay, go ahead and bring up that image. And then I'm going to give you a bunch of weird tasks to do at the same time. Like counting, or following my fingers with your eyes. And for whatever reason, the image loses its emotional charge. And the more we look at the image, the more we start to realize, not my fault. Did everything I could do. And when they get to that point where they truly believe, like, okay, maybe there wasn't anything I could do, then I feel better. Right? Symptoms go away.
Does that, so what I'm getting from that is like, does it link to the 5 stages of grief?
Yeah.
Does it kind of link to that? Because the way you were saying, oh, if I did this, that sounds like reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? What is it? It's
like bargaining. You mean?
Yeah, there you go. Bargaining.
Yeah, bargaining's a little bit more like, please God, if if you just let me live, or if you heal this disease, like I'll go back to church. I'll do everything I can to, I think grief can definitely be a part of trauma, right? Especially if someone's like in combat or they lost someone in a very like scary and traumatic way. We would call that like complicated grief too, which I've treated as well. It's a little bit more, what's important in those aspects is to actually separate the grief and what's normal, healthy grieving and the trauma. Are you thinking about the son that you lost because you miss that person, you wish he was here? Or are you thinking about him because you think you could have done something to prevent his death? Two very different things.
Yeah, but it's the same action.
Yeah, it's the same kind of event. So it's really important to kind of also differentiate that, like what's true like trauma and then what's other things, because we can do other things too. Yeah.
And if this isn't too much again, feel free to stop.
Yeah, go for it.
Do you think it's more? Do you think your patients are more girls or guys? 'Cause I'm gonna get to another point with that.
Yeah. So I know statistically, women are more likely to just seek treatment in general, and I think that goes to just stigma.
Yeah.
I think that men, societally, we need to be like quote unquote strong, and some people, will look at going to therapy as weak.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I mean, typically, in general, even if I wasn't doing trauma, primarily, most of the people I see are women, or identify as women.
Yeah, I know it's like isn't it like a lopsided statistic that men just don't seek that.
Yeah.
That's why, like, when you hear male celebrities or males in general, like, you just there's no need, there's no sign of like this person wants to be helped.
Yeah, I mean,
You know what I mean?
there are people that, it's getting better.
Yeah.
I like to think, like, the
Yeah.
more we educate, the more we kind of fight against this idea of, like, it being weak. Like, I think the more people, more men will come in, or people who identify as male will come in and get the help that we need. So my hope is that it gets better.
Yeah, because I don't know, I hear about it way too much
Yeah.
amongst people I've known, and of course, like I said, other Not people I just know personally,
Okay.
but no people I know like mutually. Like
Yeah.
things happen to them, and it's like, oh, like if you would have just done something.
Mm.
It's always like the what if, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like whenever something dramatic happens, like
Yeah.
take their own life or rely on substance, and it's just
And those what
Horrible.
ifs, I think, keep us stuck, right? Especially with trauma.
mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, there are plenty of stories that I have where, people thought that they could have done something in that moment, but after EMDR or after just whatever treatment modality I'm using, they start to actually remember like new details that they forgot or they were so avoiding looking at that they forgot they were there. They're like, wait a second, I wasn't next to this person when this happened. I was actually further. I was 20 feet away talking to so-and-so when it happened. How could I couldn't have moved 20 feet, right? So like those sort of realizations is where kind of like the healing happens.
I don't know if you remember the first time I met you.
Geez, yeah. Probably at the restaurant, I would think, but
I think it was at Brandy's.
okay. No. I met you when you were working at the restaurant.
Okay, yeah, probably.
Yeah, like in
Probably.
passing.
Yeah,
But okay, yeah.
But the first time I talked to you, you had,
Okay.
you had told me about your profession,
Right.
and I knew I was fascinated when you told me. You're like, oh yeah, I see people all the time. Like you said, there was. I don't want to go do in depth on the situation, but you said there's this one person that went through this, and now they talk about it like it's nothing.
Yeah.
And I found that so like. That was the one time I talked to you, and I remember you were getting there, and I talked to you briefly, like meet you
Yeah.
through Chris, and then I had to leave, but I stuck with me. I'm like, there's no way. Like
Yeah.
I wasn't in denial. It's just like I want to know more, which is why
Yeah.
I want to be on this.
And
I want you on this podcast.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing too. It's like, it sometimes it feels like magic wand, right? I think
Yeah.
that's more specifically we're talking about EMDR, and the only thing I can really like tell you is like, if going back to my car accident example, if I think about this horrible image of me getting into this accident,
Mhm.
like me hitting that car, and I get like all that distress in my body, like my stomach sinks, my heart starts racing, I get hot and sweaty. After, people can bring up that image, and it doesn't have that emotional charge anymore, because what we're doing is we're putting it back into like long-term memory, because PTSD isn't a emotional disorder, or like, some researchers will even say it's not a mental illness so much as it is a memory disorder, where this event in their memory gets stuck in a way to where it's on a loop. So we need to kind of like work through it and get it back into long-term memory, or put it into long-term memory where it needed to be all along. And so the image just becomes like just kind of another thing. It just becomes another memory. It's never going to be this happy, super fun thing that happened. I would never want someone to be like, my child committed suicide.
Yeah.
I'm happy that
Yeah.
happened. Never, right? It's going to be more of a neutral thing. It was terrifying to look at this image. We can look at this image at any time. We can take that power back, and it's not going to hurt. It's just going to feel a little bit more neutral.
Yeah, like going back to what I was saying, like I guess instead of bargaining, that's more acceptance. In a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I had a friend of mine who wanted to be, I guess the right term is detective.
Okay.
Not too sure. He was, I guess, an apprentice
Okay.
to another detective,
Got it.
and first time on the job, like he had, he had went to law school. This is a mutual friend, that's why I'm not too sure. Went to like law school, and the first time he was on site, he was on call as an apprentice to the main detective, and
Okay.
it was suicide.
Oh,
First time he had seen
yeah.
the person dead,
Right.
he quit
Yeah.
on the spot and changed career paths. He's like, that was horrible. That haunted me.
Yeah.
And do you think with you knowing that you'd be able to like talk him through it, like this is your job, you're gonna see this more, like see it as like nothing? Because I know that firemen, police,
Yeah.
people in the military, they just become numb to these situations essentially, you know?
I think, in terms of that, our bodies in our minds do incredible things to protect ourselves. And like the avoidance, it serves a purpose. Even if it's not helpful or super great, we're still getting something out of it.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, a lot of those kinds of things, that kind of falls under what we call like disassociation, where our body is going to be kind of numb, where we might not feel totally in our body to get through it. So yeah, people like feel numb. That's super common. Sometimes those are the cases that are really hard to treat. But I will say that those people that, like, let's say those detectives that have gone like 30 years being a cop, are going to have a handful of events that stick out the most, that are causing the most symptoms. Because here's the deal, like with PTSD, there's a difference between PTSD and trauma. And so it's one of those things where trauma is more of this umbrella term. Anything could be really traumatic, like emotionally traumatic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, you know, you can go home and catch your wife in bed with another person, right? And that's the end of your marriage of like 20 years, let's say. That's super traumatic, right? That's so damaging.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, that needs to be talked about. But that wouldn't lead to you having PTSD. So in order to be diagnosed with PTSD, you need to experience what we call a criteria A event, which is very, very violent death or violence where you felt your life was in danger in some way, shape, or form, right? Or you saw death or dying, or you saw a sudden loss. So like a friend committed suicide or got into an accident violently and died. Those are the things that lead to PTSD.
I did find this one, related to that topic.
Yeah.
There was this one kid going to, so I went to school for welding, and there was this one kid who would openly cross the border to come to school and go back every day. And I mean, it's foreign to me. I don't really travel. And he said in Mexico, it's just a whole different environment.
Yeah.
And then we're in a group at lunch, and one of the kids asked like, "Oh, it was like the wildest thing you've seen," and stuff like that. The kid openly was like, "Oh yeah, I saw like 2 dead bodies on the way over here."
Yeah.
And we just stopped, like, is there a punchline or something? He's like, no, like, it just happens. And they're like, you're not affected? He's like, no, like, I understand what it means and like what happened, but it's just, I see it all the time.
Yeah.
And that's like, that's a thing, like that happens.
Yeah, so believe it or not, I forget the exact like statistic or percentage, but there is only a handful of people that experience stuff like that who end up having post-traumatic stress disorder. Like for maybe that person, it went to long-term memory, it doesn't really affect them. It's just kind of the way life is. You know, I mean, I have seen and I've experienced myself car accidents. I don't have PTSD. And there's really no reason, things to say like why that is, but there's really only a handful of people who have experienced, I think it's like 20% of people who experience these types of events who end up having post-traumatic stress disorder. And then like 90% of those 20% of people are like veterans and combat people, so...
Also, that's even like a smaller percentage.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's out there and it happens, so... and that likelihood goes up the more you're exposed to those events.
I did want to ask if you think, because I'm questioning everything, like I said,
Okay.
I love questioning.
Yeah.
In a sense where something traumatic, correct me if I'm wrong,
Sure.
something traumatic,
Uh-huh.
getting used to something so traumatic,
Yeah.
and like I said earlier, being numb to it, would that be a bad thing in the long run? Because say I'm a fireman and I see people die all the time, and it's just I'm numb to it. Do you think it's bad because when one of my family members where something would happen to them, then I would just be like, oh, there's nothing. You get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a lot of compartmentalization that happens where like work is work. These aren't people I know, but this is a loved one that passed.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be very different.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't say it's neither good nor bad. I think it just is. I think, when it comes to disassociation, like I said, it's our body does. Our body wants to protect us, so it's going to do what it can to protect us in the only way it knows how. And maybe that is to be numb, or maybe it is to just like not go into those grocery stores. And so sometimes we kind of just need to thank our bodies for doing those things, because it probably got, this hypothetical person
Yeah.
probably got him through a lot of stuff, right? A lot of really hard things. And he had a job to do, right, in that moment. And so I would say it was probably very helpful in that moment that they felt numb, because they had a job to do.
So I do have a distant family member.
Okay.
He is, I've been to, he's the type of family member where I won't see him unless there's a big wedding going on, or worst case two, funerals.
Yeah.
The amount of funerals I've been with him at, I've never seen him take any effect to anything. Even people close to him have passed away, he's just there like, oh, I don't really like tap into my emotions, I guess. Like he's just numb to it. That's not really PTSD, that's just like numb to trauma?
I mean, it could be. I mean, it's hard to say without talking to him.
You got more context.
Yeah, but I mean, it very well could be just a response. I will say, like, I bet that either in the future or even now, that person probably experiences grief in some way, in a weird way. And the more we avoid dealing with our stuff, it's going to come out one way or another, right? So if I don't deal with my emotions, it's going to come out weird in weird situations later. Because those emotions, they deserve time. Those events probably deserve time to be processed and thought about and grieved. And the more you avoid, the worse things get. A good example is like anger outbursts, right? Like people just like losing their minds for, or losing their shit and sort of throwing things around over like the tiniest thing. It's not about like the water bottle, spilling water. It's about, something that wasn't dealt with and now it's just coming out.
Yeah. I was gonna lead to that, how emotions in that sense play into this. Because like you said, people grieve in different ways, they grieve in time different ways, they can do substance. How does it affect someone's like treatment if they deal with it? Something traumatic happens, they act out of anger, versus like act out of like, I guess, sadness is the right word to use?
Yeah.
Here?
Sure. So in the realm of trauma, we view anger as like a secondary emotion, or which is kind of part of avoidance, because I would think that it's probably a lot easier to be angry about something than it is to be sad. It probably hurts less, right? That anger serves a purpose. And so typically, if I'm treating someone and they do have a lot of anger, I need to push past that in some way to get, okay, like, why is this anger here? What's behind it? And that's a big part of my job, is just like pushing past avoidance if I see it happen.
Yeah. I don't know, like going back to the whole this statistic of like men and girls.
Okay.
I meant men and girls. Like I do wish like men's health is more talked about more, especially now that you see more. I'm guessing majority of like veterans and stuff is all male, or mainly male.
Not necessarily. I mean, we have there's a lot of different identities that are in our active duty now, which is great, or even the veterans. So I see. I don't know. I think like without knowing the exact data, I think I'd say probably half and half.
Probably balanced.
Yeah, that's probably very balanced.
So I want to ask you what I asked Ms. Chris. With this new, with this whole knowledge and field and knowledge in the field and like experience, and now you have a new place like to perform your own things. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
I do want to ask what the end game is with everything you're doing.
Yeah.
There's no way of telling.
I mean, if we're going to get the end game is to have more time for the people and the things that I want to enjoy and would like to enjoy more. Working's great. I love counseling. I love doing EMDR. I don't want it to be the only thing I do, and the only thing that is me.
Do you think you could do it though to the end of time?
Yeah, probably. I think my life would be, that life wouldn't be necessarily the life I would want to live, but I could probably do that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I feel like I said on the last part, I feel like there's no real way of saying like, all right, I did enough.
Mm.
You're always meeting people, you're hearing different stories.
Yeah.
I feel like, I've never done anything you guys have done, but it's just like, I feel like in this sense, you are a coach
Yeah.
in some way, shape, or form. Like I said about my coach, there's no set way, like, I'm done, I'm tired.
Yeah, I mean, there very well might be a time where it's just like, I can't do this anymore, maybe.
Yeah.
But I think maybe what you're also kind of alluding to is that there's never going to be an end to horrible things happening to
Yes.
people. And, you know, I can only hope that we just continue kind of like fighting a good fight, you know, just educating. Because if we can't stop horrible things from happening to people, we can maybe lessen the amount of time that it would take for these events to happen and then for them to get treatment. Going back to like earlier when I was talking about this guy who was carrying this one thing or this person carrying this thing for like 40 years, if we can lengthen that time, that's time that these people can have back, right? And that's another big thing that we'll kind of come across is through treatment, now it's more of like, why didn't I do this earlier? And now there's even like this extra layer of kind of like guilt of like, man, I really wish I would have done this earlier.
Yeah.
And they might not have been ready, right? Because you can't force people
to
talk.
Yeah.
You can't force anyone to do this because it hurts. But, you know, I think that if we can provide a lot of education to hopefully lessen that amount of time, then they'll have that much more time to back.
I'm sure you've gotten so many like stories where after treatment, they'll just look back and thank you because you were like a stepping stone in their life to change them. You know what I mean? I'm sure PTSD, like you said, stops people from doing basic things like going to the grocery store because they're scared like crowds. You know what I'm saying? So I would think after treatment you would get like those stories or like those thank yous from like a year or so later, or like however long later. Do you get any of those, or it's not really?
Yeah, here and there.
Yeah.
And my kind of response to that is like, I didn't really do much, and I think that's.
I noticed too. You were kind of like denying it when I was saying. Right? You were just like, no, not really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because a lot of my treatment, I'm kind of more of a catalyst than anything.
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately what ends up needing to happen is the person walking through the door and saying, I know like I'm avoiding and I need to now face this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I can't force anyone to face that,
Yeah.
right? I can't force anyone to do the work, but I can help them and guide them, but they're doing all the work, not me. And so, you know, I've even said this before, like to friends or other colleagues, it's like, man, I love EMDR. I love doing it. I love treating trauma. If I was on the other side of it, I would not do it. Like, I just know myself. I would avoid, and EMDR would not be super effective because I would not be an ideal client. So.
Really? She's shaking her head over there.
I would hate having me as a therapist because
Yeah.
I can be really tough and like in your face.
Yeah, and I think, I would hate me being my own therapist.
I'm pretty sure I'd hate just even attempting or thinking about it. But I don't think, thankfully I haven't experienced something so
Mhm.
that severe, but I don't think I would like find myself wanting to like open up because I just never, even like me right now, I just don't really, I'm not too open. I don't think I am. So imagine with a layer of that, I don't think I would.
Sure, and like we talked about that being,
Onions.
yeah, lots of onions. But like we also talked about like, you know, sort of that societal or like that cultural, you know, reason for people not seeking treatment could be cultural because it's just not talked about in like a Hispanic community, or it's just not valued. It's not what men in this particular culture do, or vice versa. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of barriers there that happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, like even through school, middle school and high school, I was just I would like to think that somebody that can hear you out, and I'm really respectful, and like when somebody needs somebody to talk to, like I'm there. All my friends, even like people I knew mutually, that I could just tell something's wrong. If they want to open up, like I'm there for them. But it's just it's crazy knowing that to this day I don't know how many of those stories were opened up about to like a professional.
Yeah.
And I'm sure this was years ago. I'm out of school already, so I'm sure there's stories on top of those other stories that people just go through and they just bottle up. And I don't know, through middle school and like maybe like the beginning of high school especially, it's just I would just hear people out and I'm like, why is it so uncommon to to be out there, you know what I mean? And I was like going with that. I think like in a perfect world, everybody's just not open, but they're more comfortable with how they feel, and they would find the need to seek help professionally.
Yeah, I think it comes back to like, are you living kind of the life you want to live? Is there things that are holding you back? And I think my best advice is to not necessarily make the judgment call of, is this something worth talking about? But make it as like, is this impacting me in some way? Because I'm actually 9 times out of 10 I've had plenty of people on the couch say the words of like, I don't want to really, I feel like talking about this experience that I had doesn't warrant me to get help, because there's like people out there that have gone through worse than me.
Yeah.
And so my kind of answer to that would be, to not necessarily judge if it's worth talking about, if it's worth thinking about, or if you even have that conversation, that's worth talking about.
Yeah. It's actually probably a way to say it, actually.
Yeah.
I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
With me, I know you brought up chess.
Chess.
With chess, do you know how to play chess?
Yeah, I do. I'm not good at it. Chris, I'm just not good at it. I have, I don't know, issues, I guess, with chess.
As weird as it sounds, I deal with issues like a chess game.
Okay.
So I think of it as like, you could be losing in chess. The thing I love about chess is that nobody wins.
Until they win.
No. If nobody wins, only somebody loses.
Okay.
At some point in time, you made the wrong move and the other person won.
Yeah.
So you could be losing, and then the other person winning can fuck up, and then you win. So my thought process whenever something bad comes around, or I got negative thoughts, my mind immediately flips to what's the best move on the chessboard? Like, how can I still win?
Yeah.
So when it comes to, like you said, people may not open up because other people have it worse. In my mind, everything bad that goes on in my mind, it's just which one is affecting me to the severity of like, I have to open up.
Yeah, I mean, people all the time, I'll ask them, so well, like, what brings you to counseling, or what's driving you to seek treatment now? And some people say, I can't figure this out on my own.
Yeah.
Like, I tried, can't figure it out. I need, I'm a sounding board. I need someone else to help me get unstuck. So that's, I think that's super common.
Yeah. Have you ever had a reoccurring patient? Someone like it's already gone through treatment, they were good, and then like a while later they come back. Like,
yeah, I did. Actually, someone relatively recently comes to mind. This is a particular person that this was one of those cases where they came in, and I went through their history, and I did the diagnosis, and I sat back and I'm like, man, this is going to be a tough case. And I went through it, I did the EMDR treatment, and this person just took it in stride. It was great. They had a lot to work through, but they were able to do it. And then like 4 months later, they came back and said, I remember something else now. Because that's another thing that the brain likes to do. It's like, cool, we're working through stuff. Hey, let's work through this. Remember this thing that happened? And that's what happened to him, this person. They forgot this other event that was very, scary and life-threatening, and I think their brain just threw out a nightmare, and then he started, this person was like, oh, this was an event that happened, and he came back, saw him for a few sessions, and it was good.
Wow. I mean, that was it's fascinating the way you said, the brain will just activate itself again, remember different things, or additional things, and then bring them back to that point.
Yeah, I think sometimes we forget that sometimes our brain wants to work with us and is, helping us. So even though that's really scary, I'm like, man, it sounds like your body and your brain really wants to work through this.
It's I think it's showing you more, so that way it's it's easier trying to fight that.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
What do you think? How's I gonna word this? I don't know how I'm gonna word this. I completely zoned out. I don't know where I was gonna go with that. I was then again, because I'm just I'm taking in all this info and it's just.
Yeah.
I remember having. This is somewhat related to it. I remember having, when I was taking college courses, I remember having so much fun and being fascinated with psychology.
Yeah.
Just because there's so much depth to it, and this is only the corner of the brain that you're at.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a lot, and there's so much we don't know too.
Yeah.
It was a few days ago that that neural link from Tesla.
Oh, the incision in the head.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Elon Musk or Tesla came out with a product where I think what they're hoping is that they can link neurons and brain waves to devices. So someone who lost a hand, who now has a prosthetic, that prosthetic can have movement with their brain. I don't know. Basically, you put a chip in someone's brain. And yeah, I mean, it's just crazy, the amount of things that we can do and the things that we don't know.
Do you think there's room for having that chip and in a way feeding treatment through there?
Yeah, man, I don't know. That would be cool. That would be great. One day where all you can do is just zap, someone and call
someone's
it.
I'm dealing with it. Hold up.
Did you say cool or cruel?
It's cool.
Oh, that's
It's cool.
cool.
Yeah, no, that would be great.
Yeah, just one day I'm dealing with it. Oh, hang on. How about now?
Yeah.
They're just I'm good.
Yeah, exactly. Good. Cool. Great.
I think that's scary though. That whole chip in the brain thing, or chip in the head, because this is the first stage. This is the first time anybody is ever doing this. The first thing I heard about that was you can link devices to it, where you can play music through there, in your head. So you don't even need that was years ago. I don't know if they're doing that now, but I didn't hear about the prosthetic thing.
Yeah, I think that's primarily what they were thinking that it would be used the most for, but I'm sure we'll just go to
Useless things.
Yeah, useless things and then dirty thing, right? Our brains just go to probably porn at some point, so it all just comes back to that.
So somebody's gonna get curious and just start doing
Right, yeah, that's probably what it's gonna come down to. But I was actually looking at I don't know, Facebook or whatever, but the tweet that Elon Musk sent out was we just had the first person successfully get the Neuralink implanted, and it's working, and they're recovering, and all signs show progress. And people were capturing that and making fun of it. This is kind of a diary entry that you would find at the end of a Resident Evil game, the beginning of the end.
Yeah, I don't know where that's gonna go, or what the goal is. But it's scary.
Yeah,
I think so, but it can be useful. But everything useful, there can be a bad side.
Sure.
Always. Now, do you think there is another field in this area that fascinates you? What's your second place? The PTSD first, obviously.
Ooh.
I do gotta know, because there's a lot of things going on with the brain.
Yeah, I think.
You can't use eating disorder.
Yeah,
That's
I don't even want to touch, like, I don't want to touch eating disorders. Just, I think there's a part of me that just finds, like, yeah, I don't know. There's just, I don't want to touch eating disorders at all, or typical. And, you know, a lot of eating disorder clients have a lot of trauma, you know, that's a lot of it. So, is there another area that interests me in the therapy world?
Because you said you treat anxiety as well. What was it?
Yeah, you know, I do treat like depression, anxiety. So I think EMD. I think I'm always looking for new treatment modalities, and there are like improvements or even like new treatment modalities that's spinning off of EMDR. There's something called ART, accelerated reprocessing therapy. I don't know too much about it, but it's a new thing. Apparently, it's, you know, shown. So I think I'm always like interested in new things, which goes with my ADHD brain, where it's like, ooh, new, like.
Yeah.
So, I think I'm more interested in that more than I am diagnoses or specific problems. I think I want more tools to help people quicker. Is more what I'm interested in gathering as many tools as I can.
Go linking back to anxiety though.
Yeah.
I do know that I'd seen a statistic that anxiety levels amongst teens are really high.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah.
They're like I think it's what is it? Teens is number one, and then like 20 to 30 is like second or something like that. Or how does that? Or it's just varies.
I'm not really sure of the actual statistics, but I know that like in recent years, anxiety and depression in like teens has increased dramatically, and it's been linked to increase of like phone use or social media.
Oh really?
Specifically, yeah. And I think it's more about, you know, because something I heard the other day was, oh, the world seems to be getting worse. And there's a lot of things that are happening that sound really, really horrible. And I don't think I think bad things in the world have been happening the entire time humans have been around.
Mm-hmm.
But we have so much access to looking at all the horrible things in a split second on our phone.
Oh yeah.
40 years ago, 50 years ago, I would not have known that there was an earthquake in Tibet, but I now know, right? And so I think the constant exposure to all of the bad things all the time would lead to a lot of people to think like, yeah, what's the point? You know, to lead to like that anxiety of, you know, constantly being on the lookout for the next bad thing to happen.
Yeah, I guess like even the majority of social media, and I guess I'm gonna go down this route, like news is always bad things. So I guess like you said, you hear more negative things like use of firearms at schools, or like things like, or even terrorist attacks, or even like, you know what I mean? It's just I get what you're saying, how social media affects it, and not too far back, I worked at a pharmacy. I was a pharmacy technician, and I did notice a high use of anxiety medication. And it was like teens. I was like, they're on this thing right now. I did want to ask like what you thought about that whole anxiety section of like your specialty.
Well, kind of going something that, you know, we talk about. So anxiety is fear of something happening, probably.
Yeah.
And something that is actually used in cognitive processing therapy, or is this idea of probability versus likelihood. And so a lot of people will confuse the two. So it's, statistically speaking, it is possible that anything can happen, right? Sitting here talking to you, a car can run through this building and take us both out. That's possible, statistically possible.
Yeah, it's possible.
Right, 0.0000001% possible. But if I lived my life thinking, okay, well, if that's possible, then I need to, you know, be on guard all the time, or walk in here and be like, okay, well, I can't sit in this corner because this statistical probability, that's me confusing what's possible with what's likely.
Yeah, because the likelihood of that is like even 0.000 like way off.
Right, but I'm behaving as if it's
Yeah.
like 80% possible,
Mhm.
right? And I think the news kind of plays into that, right? Because the news is going to show you all the things that are bad, right? Hey, this shooting happened. Here was another shooting. But to go on kind of that idea of if people are now afraid to go into movie theaters and
Mhm.
watch a movie,
Oh,
right, because there was a shooting, you have to think, okay, statistically speaking, if how many movies are playing every single day where no one's shooting at the theater? So if we take that one shooting with how many millions and millions of movies that play every single day in theaters across the country, and nothing bad's happening, no one's reporting on that, right? No one's saying, hey, here's another day with this movie theater not going through anything important. So I think that plays into the idea of confusing what's possible with what's likely, and how that could, harm us.
So you think social media is a bad thing?
No,
What do you think it is?
I think,
Amongst teens, 'cause I don't know, there's nothing good and there's nothing bad. I don't think
Yeah.
that's you.
and I do agree with that, right? Like
Yeah.
social media, there's nothing good or nothing bad about it. Like there's pros and cons to everything.
Yeah,
And I think social media, like, it lets us connect in ways that we never could before, right? I could talk or catch up with, my grandma who lives across the country, who without social media might not be able to keep up with. I think social media gives us new ways to connect, and there's pros and cons to it, right? And so I think it could be important to not get hung up in all of the negative in social media, but to remind yourself of the good. And so there's a lot of posts that are happy. So it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, there's a good exposure to like great things, and then there's obviously the dark side
Yeah.
to all that good stuff.
Sure.
It's pretty bad. And I grew up, I think, in the era where social media was on the rise, especially for teens. Because I think when I was in fifth grade, that's when Instagram was founded.
Okay.
I think, and then Snapchat was founded, I think, my sixth grade year or something
Gotcha.
like that. So I sort of saw, obviously I wasn't even mature, I was 12, 13.
Yeah.
I saw the increase of how it affected kids, or people, at least people my age group, that's all that I knew.
Yeah.
And then during those like quote unquote mature years of 17, 18, like becoming an adult, I didn't see how it affected everybody because I was dealing with the pandemic,
Yeah.
I didn't go to high school after my spring break of junior year.
It's crazy.
It's bad.
Yeah.
It's horrible. I don't think about that anymore.
Well, it's just like a whole experience that you don't have, or a different experience that other people
Yeah.
Because usually, you hit your senior year, you do all the senior year things, and that's just like a gaping hole for you.
Yeah. So spring break, junior year is like, an extra week.
Yeah,
I only went back to school for football practice and my medical classes.
it's crazy.
So nothing, pep rallies, Friday night lights. the
Yeah,
stereotypical
all
lights.
that's gone.
I didn't know that.
British vibe.
Wait, you want to read something up? I can cut this
You
out by the
already,
way. I can cut this out by the way, like it's.
You like went way, like it would be going way
Yeah,
back.
well, we're good.
What about a recap anyway? It's the third clip.
Yeah,
Or like we're just gonna like end off because we passed the hour mark. you know?
Gotcha. Do you want to change shirts real quick?
It's a cap. It's a cap.
I was,
Oh,
no,
good.
I was thinking about
What?
like the whole social media thing too, and just like why, like the fact that like mental health is still taboo, but it's talked about more,
Yeah.
and like that is like due primarily because of millennials and the younger generations, right? Like they are the ones that are normalizing like self-care and normalizing like talking about your mental health and
Yeah.
things like that. Sometimes it can be a little drastic, but at the same time, like it is being talked about more, and like everyone thinks, oh, all these young people think they have mental illness, but the fact of the matter is that like people are upset because we're talking about it.
Right.
It's never been talked about before, so it's like, oh, well, when I was younger, I'm like, no, mental health is mental
It was
health.
still there. It just
It's
wasn't
always
talked
been there,
about.
just was never talked
Yeah.
about.
Should we recap it because the mic didn't pick up?
Yeah.
I'll give you the honor.
Okay.
What?
So Chris brought
You're
up
far away.
a great point with social media and that why, because mental health, especially in social media, is talked about more now than ever, and why is it more talked about but not necessarily being utilized as much? And I think part of that is what Chris was saying. It's kind of like millennials and the generation of like talking about it more and destigmatizing and trying to bring awareness to it, and then the other, more older generations, because that wasn't what they were doing, might be more combative, or say, well, my day it wasn't, my day we didn't have as much mental health. I'm like, well, to Chris's point, it was still there, it was still out there, it just wasn't talked about, and you're mad that now there's more awareness and that it's being talked about more.
It's good. I'm glad you recapped it.
Could have said better.
Because we were just like looking that way, and I was looking at the things it was picking you up, and it was just like all the way to the left. I was like,
Just
I
flat
didn't
line.
get any of that.
I can scream at you.
But yeah, like this episode has for sure taught me a lot, and of course I'm gonna question everything because I have been this whole time because I just want to learn. And anybody in the comments is probably gonna ask away, like, or
Yeah.
critique things or interpret
Sure.
things differently after that. But I did want to ask you like a final message.
Yeah.
And
For me to
from you, like anything in regards to like
Yeah.
that whole field.
I think just in general, if you are struggling, we are here, reach out. And that goes to everyone and anyone. That's what we're here for, and we're going to be here when you guys are ready, and where anyone is ready to reach out, we're here. But yeah, if you're struggling, if you're having a hard time, life doesn't seem as vibrant anymore, talk to someone. Don't necessarily bottle it all in.
And click the link in the description because I'm on Nico's website.
Yeah. So we'll plug our practice.
I don't want to do because I mean, the goal with this podcast isn't to interview anybody. It's just to have a conversation with them, have their story be told, have
Sure.
their message be sent out, and this one is important.
Yeah, it
Of course.
absolutely is.
I mean, this is just like I said, it's something that's not always talked about or touched up on.
Yeah,
So this message will for sure be out there now.
yeah.
I do want to thank you for giving me your time.
Yeah, of
Even
course.
though it's scheduled pretty late.
Yeah,
We guess it's 7. It's 11 right
it's
now.
11. Wow.
I mean, I got busy. Y'all got busy. It's just
We're good.
But there's always room for a part 2.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
did you want to plug your place?
Yeah, we'll go plug our private practice, Sonatus Counseling. That's SONATUS Counseling. We are here to help with any problems that anyone might be experiencing. Here in San Antonio, Texas, in the state of Texas, we do telehealth and in-person services. If you are looking for EMDR specifically, I can definitely help you out with that.
And all that's gonna be linked in the description below, even on Spotify and YouTube.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah, we gotta get you a little sticker. We have stickers for we'll put it on your laptop there.
Oh yeah, we have a synopsis.
This is my mom's work laptop.
Okay.
So
even
I'll
better.
keep it. I'll put it on my phone. Even better.
Even better.
She's a teacher, so.
Yeah, we'll slap it right there. Yeah.
I think that's it for today's pod.
Yeah, it was great.
There's always room for a part 2.
Thanks for having me.
There's always
Yeah,
room for a
appreciate
Oh
part
my
2.
gosh, we need a part 2. Like we can just do like a segment where it's like they ask us like questions that we can answer as
Yeah.
therapists.
Wow, did you see that? I roll questions.
Yeah, questions.
I love questions.
Questions as therapist.
I also had like a really good point I wanted to bring up earlier, but
You can. It's not too late. I can cut this out, or you can add it in if you want.
well, no, I was just gonna say like why is it that people don't go to therapy? Like you had touched on it a little bit earlier, but we kind of missed like the whole why is it that people don't come to therapy? Like why don't they seek help? And I was gonna kind of add on to that it's why do people go to the doctor when they're having physical health concerns? Because they know that they're sick. And I think that people struggle to go to therapy because they don't want to confirm that they're sick. Or broken in some way. Like you go to the ER doctor because you have a broken bone. You are broken. We have to fix that. But I think people are really afraid to confirm that they might be broken in some way, and they don't want to do therapy because that means I am broken. So I'm just gonna talk to my pal because it's not that serious.
Yeah,
That's what I was gonna say.
that was
If you want me to reiterate that.
You could? Or do you want?
Yeah, Chris can do it. Oh, right.
Thank you again.
Of course.
It's me again.
Now you're good. Hi. Don't tell me back to back. This isn't a week apart. Because they're going up a week apart. So I don't want them to think like we're in the same tire. I changed. I don't know what
When
changed.
did you get that hat?
What are you talking about? Last week.
Oh my god, that's funny.
Well,
I'm wearing the same thing. That's so funny.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
So,
Got it. Oh, okay.
You
Yeah,
wanna reiterate?
I wanted to reiterate. I wanted to make a point. So I know you and Rob were talking a little bit about like earlier about like going to therapy and like people not wanting to go to therapy, stigma and things like that. And the way I like to think about it is like why do people go to the doctor or why do people like go to the hospital when they're like physically ill? Because they feel sick, right? They are sick. They have a broken bone. 'Tis broken, we must fix. And so
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are very fearful about coming to therapy because they believe that it's the same concept and they don't want to confirm that they are sick. Maybe that's scary, thinking that there's a sickness there, or maybe that they feel that they might be broken, and like going to therapy, going to a therapist is confirming that I might be broken in some way. So I think that kind of leads a lot to that, and so we're here to break that stigma a little bit more. But yeah, kind of like you were talking about, like your pals would like come to you and talk about things, which is great that they're talking about it.
yeah.
But I think that also kind of says like, oh, but it's not that serious. See, because I don't need to go to therapy because I'm not broken. It's fine. I can just like talk about it. I'll move on. We'll be okay. But maybe not, right? And so coming to therapy is not us confirming that you are like broken or that you need fixing or anything like
Yeah.
that. Sometimes we just need to like talk it out, process through it, move forward.
Thank you for the cameo and the closing. But yeah, in the comment section or even on their website, link in the description below. Like I said, if any questions or you seeking help or any assistance, I mean, we're here. Like you said, both
We
here.
love questions.
Yeah.
I love to answer questions.
Anything you want to leave in the comments, feel free. I'm sure they'll answer back. Or email them. Or how does it work? Can you like reach out?
I mean,
How does it work on the website?
what I'm hearing is part two. How does it work on the website?
Like if somebody has a question, they go to the website and like ask away or like schedule something, or how does that work?
We have a. Do you want me to jump in?
I'm like, I'm sorry.
So
Is he in the shop?
we have a.
No.
Where do I go? So
Okay.
we have on our website there are contact forms on every page that you can send us a message, and we can email back and forth. If you guys have any questions or concerns, or if you want to schedule something, you can give us a call. You can use the contact form, or you can send us an email at info@sonatuscounseling.com.
But it was like mental health questions in general. Like you can always just like send them to our boy Brandon, and if there are enough and we need to do like a part two, we'd be happy to come back on. And
I'll be back in San Antonio soon, so who knows?
Ooh, yeah, you can gather a bunch of we can do 5-minute therapy where
ask
we
the expert.
answer questions. Yeah,
Ooh.
ask the expert.
Oh, but ask the expert. Oh my gosh, never mind. Cut me off.
You're good. That's gonna be it for today's podcast. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're new here, make sure you like, subscribe, and follow on all platforms. That's it. I'm bad at outros. Bye.